الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Welcome back to another session. Inshallah, today we're continuing the very important conversation about marriage and rights in marriage for both the husband and the wife. And today, inshallah, I want to start off by asking the question, who should a person marry? And this is a very important question. It seems pretty simple, but in fact, it's very important to ask and have this conversation. Why? Well, in my own experience, this is my own experience, the way I find people approaching marriage is not the most effective. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I don't think it's the most effective and the most meaningful way of beginning a real relationship. And we all know this. And in terms of how people in the West view marriage, they view it as an institution of love. And of course, we want love in marriage. That's what we want. However, where the Western world seems to diverge a little bit in terms of how Islam or how the Prophet ﷺ presents this topic, the topic of choosing a spouse, is that in the Western world, there is this presumption that in order for my marriage to be good, I need to marry someone I already love. I need to marry someone I already love. Whereas in Islam, it's actually somewhat different. Islam wants love between husband and wife, and that's very important. And we see in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the love he had for Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and the love he had for Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, and his spouses in general, and the love they had for him. So the goal is love. However, where does that come from? The Prophet ﷺ tells us, when you choose a spouse, there are two things that you should look for. Just two. But these two things are very important. The Prophet ﷺ says, مَنْ أَتَاكُمْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوا. If someone comes to you asking for your daughter's hand in marriage, or the father of a girl comes and says, hey, why don't we kind of let our children communicate, your son, my daughter. Someone comes to you with a proposal for marriage, then look for two things. Look at their character, their akhlaq, their manners, and number two, and this isn't any particular order, right? But these are the two things that's listed. Number two, their piety, their righteousness. And in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ switches the order. Look at their piety and look at their character. And some scholars have commented saying that, it seems synonymous here. Of course, in the afterlife, piety is what we look at first. The first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us on the Day of Judgment, or at least asks the believers, is about their salah, their prayer. But also at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ emphasizes, makes it clear that our character and our behaviors play a major role on the Day of Judgment. That the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that one of the heaviest things on the scales on the Day of Judgment is good character. And someone who doesn't have good character is someone who's going to go around lying and slandering and harming others. And the Prophet ﷺ, and in verses in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us what the consequences of such behaviors are on the Day of Judgment. That all the people this person harmed will come and take their good deeds, take their good deeds until they're left with absolutely no good deeds. And so here in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, or it's at least being narrated both ways, and there is meaning to that. And when it comes to marriage, it is very important that both are there. Because someone who is pious, meaning someone who prays their salah and is, mashallah, following the sunnah, but you notice they don't have good character, let me be very clear here. Their piety is primarily external. Piety hasn't truly entered their heart. I'm not saying this is a bad person. I'm not saying this is a hypocrite. I'm not saying this is a person of the hellfire. I'm not saying that their piety is completely and entirely fake. What I'm saying is that their piety has only reached their physical bodies. It has yet to be rooted in their hearts. And so when they behave with piety, right, the heart might not be acting with piety. And so it's very important to have both. Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّمَا جِئْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have come to perfect good character. And we can talk about maybe in another session how character is directly related with piety. And how when the Prophet ﷺ is saying, I've come to perfect a character, he's in reality saying that perfecting our piety is part and parcel with perfecting our character, and vice versa. So when you go and look at someone for marriage, make sure they have these two things. Their good character and their piety will make sure, first and foremost, that this person isn't going to harm your child. They're not going to oppress your child. They're not going to exploit them. They're not going to abuse them. And at the same time, the good character and the piety will promote good behavior towards your child, towards you, if you're the one getting married. That someone with good character will behave generously and graciously with their spouse. They will behave kindly and gently with their spouse. They will be patient and forbearing with the faults of their spouse. That is what good character means. And so don't just go and be impressed by someone because they pray 5 times a day. We want that, of course. I do not recommend you marrying someone who does not pray 5 times a day. If they are ignoring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they're more likely to ignore you. This isn't general. It means not all people are going to be like that. But it's something you really need to consider. So piety and character. The Prophet ﷺ does not mention race. He does not mention financial status. He does not mention tribe. He does not mention skin color. Because us coming from the East, there's this notion that a girl or a boy with lighter skin and blonde hair and colored eyes is, more valuable, is better than someone with a darker tone of skin or black hair or brown eyes. And Prophet ﷺ is not making this a criteria to look at, rather piety and character. Likewise, he's not saying marry the one you love. Why? Because what is love really? What is love? How can you love someone before they've sacrificed for you? Is love not sacrifice for the other person? Expressing to the other person their love? How can you be sure that so-and-so loves you when you have not truly lived with them for a while? When they have not done things that truly show sacrifice and care, show you that they put you in front of them. And I mainly say this to ladies, because ladies tend to succumb to this a little bit more than men, if not a lot more than men. Just because he says, I love you, and you are so beautiful, and I want to be with you the rest of your life, does not mean they mean it. It does not mean they mean it. There are so many cases of young ladies who start to talk to a guy, and he comes with this romantic tone and these romantic words, and he might even write a poem for her. And they end up getting married, and as soon as they get married, he completely changes. Does he really love you? When he wrote you those poems and he shared his feelings with you? Is that truly love? They're just words, they're empty. What is love except through behavior? Words are cheap, words are easy. And so even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this a part of our theology, a part of our iman. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ. Say, if you truly love Allah. Some people come and say, Allah knows that what's in my heart. Allah knows that I love Him. I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, if you truly love Allah, فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهِ. If you truly love Allah, if you are honest in the words that you are saying, then follow the Prophet ﷺ and Allah will love you. Meaning, true love, sincere love is expressed through behavior and not just words. Anyone can say anything. I can come and call myself the scholar, I did this and I did that. Does it mean I'm actually that? Absolutely not, but rather behavior. Behavior, behavior, behavior. And again, even when you look at scholarship in Islam, who is a real scholar? Right? The scholar said that it's not just someone who says, Qala Allah and Qala Rasul. Allah said and the Messenger said. A scholar is not someone who has the ability to quote what Imam Abu Hanifa said and what Imam Malik said and the Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad rahimahumullah ta'ala jami'an. It's not someone who just has the ability to say this and that, but rather someone who knows those things and behaves and acts upon them. That is a scholar. And so talk is cheap. And so, dear sisters, especially young ones, do not be naive. In fact, naivety will actually weaken the marriage. A woman who is stronger in her personality, and stronger in her personality does not mean assertive, does not mean dominant. I don't mean that. But rather what I mean is that she thinks and says, does this person really love me? And what is the evidence that this person really loves me? And they don't just accept the claims of another person. And sometimes young men fall into this as well. Do not enter a relationship just because someone says, do not enter a marriage just because someone says they love you. Rather prove that you love me. Show it. So when it comes to who to choose as a spouse, these are the two things you want. And parents, look at these two things. Right? Also, advice to parents. Your children who are born and raised in America do not have the same mentality, do not have the same social experience as you coming from a country in the East. Okay, for them, they don't care really too much about the tone of the skin. In fact, here in America, someone who is tanner tends to be seen as more attractive than someone who's lighter in skin. Kind of opposites of your own experiences of your parents. And so also ethnicity, tribe, they don't think about these things. If they do, it's very small. And so if you are to try and force your child to marry the race or the ethnicity or the tribe of your choice, just because you think they're superior or this tribe or ethnicity is superior, it's going to backfire. I know a lot of people, or at least I know a few people who have this mentality where our people are the best and I want my children to marry from our people. I don't accept other than our people. And what ends up happening, their children don't marry that from that ethnicity or from that people. It's kind of a message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh, so-and-so, I am the Lord of all. And race and ethnicity and social class and skin color is not what is important when it comes to a person's place in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is in regards to who to marry. Now, when you actually go up and start agreeing upon dowry, start agreeing upon the marriage, one of the very unknown bits and pieces about marriage in Islam is that both husband and wife can add stipulations to the marriage, meaning they can add certain conditions to the marriage, so long as it doesn't go against one of the fundamental purposes of marriage. So, for example, a woman can come and say, look, I am studying, and it is important for me to complete my education. So a condition to this marriage is that you let me complete my education and that you pay for my education, for example. A lady can add this to the marriage, and if the husband agrees to it, he must honor it. Likewise, either can say that my condition to entering into this marriage is that we don't move from this area. I want to live in this area. I want to be close to my family. And so you don't have the right to say we're going to move to another place, meaning a different city altogether or a different region altogether. You have the right to do that. Likewise, the woman can say that I want the right to work. And if the husband agrees to that, he must honor it. Also, this is very important because here in America, divorce is very difficult, or at least Islamic divorce, talaq, is very difficult because the masajid don't have any authority, don't have any say in the court of law. And an Islamic marriage contract, a nikah, or Islamic divorce, a talaq, has absolutely no meaning in the court of law. So what happens very often is that when divorce occurs, the husband becomes stubborn and immature and oppressive towards his wife and refuses to give her an Islamic talaq, even though they are divorced in the court, etc. And so this woman is stuck in this Islamic marriage until the entire divorce process is complete, and then from there she can go and to her local masjid and get an Islamic talaq. We'll talk about that inshallah in a future session. But what happens is she gets stuck in this marriage. Why? He refuses to divorce her. And the masajid aren't courts. And so we cannot administer a fasakh, an annulment, or a khula, another annulment. Again, we'll talk about these in a future session. And so she's stuck in this. So what the woman's side of the family can do, the wife can do, is add a condition to the marriage and say that, for example, the father of this wife, the father of the wife, has the right to divorce her daughter from this man. You have the right to do that. You have the right to add this stipulation. And it's part of the sunnah, right? The Prophet ﷺ told his wives, I have given you the right to divorce yourselves. If you want to divorce yourself, you can go ahead and do that. So it is Islamically acceptable. And I highly recommend that the fathers, the awliya, the guardians of these women, entering into marriage, add this stipulation. Okay? But for women, for the wife entering, make sure that the one you're giving this permission to is responsible and mature and wise. The last thing we want is an overreactive father, an overprotective father, or an unwise father who might dissolve the marriage for his own personal gain, or because he was he was upset with his son-in-law and he went ahead and divorced his daughter, etc. So just make sure that the one you choose for this role is competent and will carry on that role. Okay. So when it comes to entering into a marriage, you have both husband and wife have the right to add stipulations to the marriage contract, so long as it doesn't go against one of the fundamental purposes of marriage. What are some of the fundamental purposes of marriage? Well, to live together. So if the husband comes and says, I want to enter into this marriage, but I'm adding this condition where we never live together. That's not an accepted stipulation. Or that I will never spend on you. All your spending is on yourself. That stipulation is not accepted. Among other things. For example, we never sleep in the same bed. Right? It's my right that I never want to sleep with you in the same bed. This is a rejected stipulation. Why? Because it goes against one of the fundamental purposes of marriage. So do take this into account and do consider it. Now, once marriage occurs, you get into the issue of the role of the husband and the role of the wife. Here in America, it's quite different than the traditional family where the woman stays at home, takes care of the children, cooks, cleans, etc., and the husband goes out and earns a living and spends on his family. Now you have, in fact, probably more common to find a household where both husband and wife work. In fact, sometimes they are forced into such a scenario because the salary of the husband doesn't suffice, especially for those of us living in Southern California, where the cost of living is extremely expensive because of the cost of rent in the housing market. So both husband and wife are working in order to really live a comfortable life. So what are the roles when it comes to husband and wife? Well, I believe I spoke last week about the particular roles, but today I want to look at some of the contemporary issues, such as medical treatments, medical costs and insurance, when it comes to cooking and cleaning. These more traditional roles. What you find in the classical books of fiqh, okay? When you find in the classical books of fiqh that the majority of scholars, if not all four schools of fiqh, say that it is not the obligation of the husband to pay for his wife's medical expenses. Likewise, it's not the obligation of the wife to cook or clean. So you have that. Now, maybe the ladies are kind of partly happy because, oh wow, I don't have to do this, not my Islamic duty, and partly upset. Wait, how is he not paying for my medical insurance and whatnot? And so it's a little bit confusion here. However, we must say the following. The concept of urf, the concept of customs, plays a role when it comes to determining what is the role of husband and wife. In other words, what are the social expectations of a particular land, clarify and help determine the roles of each. And therefore, when we talk about medical expenses, back in the day, you don't have medical insurance. In fact, you had hospitals, but hospitals, at least in the Muslim world, were waqf. They were an endowment, free. Anyone goes and they're treated for free. And maybe sometimes you have very unique cases or exclusive cases where you have to call in an expert, a specialist to come, and maybe there was some fine there. And so the whole medical realm or the whole medical part of a person's life was very nominal, was very minimal. So maybe, it wasn't necessary for the guy to pay for her medical bills. You don't have pharmaceuticals and all this stuff. In our times today, it is an essential part of our lives. Essential not in that everyone is sick, but essential in that it is the law. Right? It is the law. And these medical bills are extremely expensive. And, whenever a lady is pregnant, she has to go to multiple appointments with her doctor. Once a week, and then it comes once every 2 weeks and once a month. And then even after the child is born, she has to keep going back to the doctor checkups. If the husband isn't paying for this, how is she going to pay for it? How is she going to pay for it? And in the end, these medical expenses almost always go back to something that benefits him as well. When it comes to, for example, having a child. Well, that child is yours, oh man. And so we cannot hold on to the classical opinion. And today we have to say that the medical expenses must be on the financial provider, who is the husband. Now, if the woman is working and she has a better insurance plan with her company, that's perfectly fine, right? But I'm saying that we cannot exclude this from the husband's responsibility. Rather, we incorporate it within his standard financial responsibilities towards his wife. Now, when it comes to cooking and cleaning, in our times today, this has more to do, this is more important than perhaps what it was back in the day. Back in the day, people lived next to each other, family was always together, etc. So cooking and cleaning was done in a more social setting. And you have a group of ladies coming together, they socialize and they might cook. Right? Also back in the day, food wasn't in abundance as it is today. Also in our times today, having dinner together is an important part of family. It is an important part to building a stable home. And so we want families to have home-cooked meals. Also, food in America is really bad. It's not good quality. And eating from fast food too often, eating from outside food too often is going to cause health problems. And so we want families to be together. We want families to cook home-cooked meals, etc. And the same thing, we want the home to be clean. We cannot put all the responsibility on the husband. Now he has to work, and now he goes home and has to cook, and now, etc., etc. Share responsibilities. When the husband goes home, he should help his wife cook. Or if they both work, go home and cook together. And so we cannot just take the classical position and superimpose it on our lives today. Our lives today, the structure of life today is very different than pre-modern times. And so I think the wisest opinion to take when it comes to responsibilities of husband and wife is really what Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayh said. He said that the responsibilities of husband and wife goes back to urf, goes back to the customs of the land. So what is normal when it comes to the customs of the land, that is what is Islamic when it comes to what is expected of the husband and wife from the Islamic perspective. Now, the wife is working. Let's say the wife is working. Some women come and say that, Islam has given me the right to all of my money. You have no right to that. And on top of that, you have to spend on me, oh husband. Now she's working. If they have children, now the husband has to put the children in daycare. He has 2-3 kids. That is $3,000 a month of extra expenses on the husband. And if they're both working full-time jobs until, if it's 9 to 5, 9 to 4, daycare tends to end around 3:30, something along those lines. And so now they have to pay overtime for the daycare, even more expensive, among other things. And so, following the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullah alayh, here in America, if husband and wife are both working, then the custom of our land is that both need to share the financial burden, financial responsibilities. Yes, women, you have a right to your wealth. But it's not your husband's responsibility to have to pay more for daycare. Rather, the responsibility of safeguarding the home, which includes the children, is really initially for the wife. So if a woman is working, that forces the husband to take on extra financial responsibilities, and that he initially does not have to take on. And so the wife has to chime in, has to chip in. Anything beyond that is for her. Now, oh husband, if you're making a good salary and you can take care of all of these things comfortably, then be generous with your wife. She made some money, let her use that money for herself. You don't need to hoard everything. It doesn't need to be egalitarian 50-50. Islam doesn't buy into this 50-50 mentality. Rather, Islam buys into graciousness and generosity. And oh woman, oh lady, oh wife, if you're making money and you want to buy certain things that are expensive, buy it with your own money. Alhamdulillah, you have that. Go ahead and enjoy it. Don't force your husband, who might not be able to afford those expensive shoes, an expensive person, and an expensive car. Don't put that on him. Alhamdulillah, you have money. Don't put that pressure on your husband. Main thing, work together. And that is how you build love. Love comes with time. Love comes through your actions. Now, another important topic when it comes to marriage is the idea or the notion of secret marriages. Secret marriages. It's becoming kind of not a big deal here in America, but you're hearing about this every now and then, especially if you're on the social media scene and you follow maybe certain popular figures and whatnot. What is a secret marriage? Let us first define it. But before that, know that this topic of secret marriages has become more of a ideological kind of pawn of a broader ideological struggle versus between the liberal Muslims who are trying to incorporate liberal principles into our tradition and try to understand our tradition through the liberal paradigm, versus more traditional or classical who want to kind of counter that. Right? So in order to avoid these two paradigms and find what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, what Allah and His Messenger told us, so that we please Allah and His Messenger, we need to first and foremost define what a secret marriage is. Well, the scholars spoke about this. Secret marriages are nothing new. Imam Malik, Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Ahmed, they all spoke about this issue 1,200 years ago. I mean, think about that. It's nothing new. All of the scholars agree that a secret marriage is a marriage that occurs without the presence of two witnesses. If there are no witnesses, minimum of two, for this marriage, then that is a secret marriage by the consensus of scholars. And all the scholars said that this marriage is invalid. Meaning, oh ladies, if a man comes to you and says, I want to marry you, but you know what, right now, I don't want it to be public because I'm going through certain things and this and that, but just right now, it's between me and you, right? We don't want to involve anyone. Don't tell your father, don't tell anyone else. It's between me and you. That is an invalid marriage. And no, oh dear sisters, and the sisters who tend to kind of find themselves in this dilemma are sisters who have been divorced or widowed, or they're older in age, and it's become very difficult for them to get married, and their options are very limited, and they want to get married. No, oh dear sister, a man who comes and is not willing to be public about his marriage to you, does not want your family to be involved in this, is someone who has an agenda. He is someone who has an agenda. He will exploit you. He will take advantage of you. He will use you. And then when he is done, he will let you go. And there is nothing you can do about it. All your rights are gone. And so a secret marriage, by the consensus of scholars, is a marriage that occurs in complete secrecy where there aren't even two witnesses. That is by consensus. Now, the majority of scholars have said that a secret marriage is a marriage that is not publicized. In other words, even if the guardian of the lady is present and there are two witnesses present, the majority of scholars say that they are not allowed to conceal that marriage. There must be an amount of publicity, right? There must be an amount of publicity. This doesn't mean you go on social media and say, I got married to so-and-so, everybody knows, etc. But at least those who know, those who are involved in your life, such as your maybe first family, such as your children, etc., they know about this. There's an amount of publicity to where the rights of both husband and wife can be preserved. Okay, so that is the majority of scholars. And therefore, if a person enters into marriage and there's the wali, the guardian, and two witnesses, but they conceal it afterwards, no one else knows about it, that is an invalid marriage by the majority of scholars. The only ones who said that that is a valid marriage and there's no need to publicize beyond that are the Shafi'is. Valid opinion, We love Imam al-Shafi'i. I'm just giving you the spectrum here. And so the evidence for this, the Prophet ﷺ, اعقدوه بالمساجد وأعلنوه بالمشاهد. The Prophet ﷺ said, do your marriages in the masjid and publicize your marriage, make it public. Publicize your marriages. And really the purpose of this is to make sure that the rights of both husband and wife are preserved. Dear sisters, if you don't have a father or brothers or children who are there to protect you, if you are being harmed by your husband, right, then the husband is can take complete advantage of you. I have seen this with my own eyes. So please be careful and do not succumb to that. Make sure your marriage is known. If you don't want it to be completely public, then make sure at least your father and your siblings, your family knows about this so that they can have your back if you need them to be there for you. And last but not least, dear brothers and sisters, the Prophet ﷺ says, مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ مِنْكُمُ الْبَاءَةَ فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ. Whoever is capable of getting married, meaning they have the financial capacity and they have the maturity to get married, then get married. Do not delay marriage. Do not delay marriage. Sisters, I understand many of you have ambitions of becoming, professionals and having a career and becoming, earning your PhD and whatnot. I encourage you to do that. But don't let that be a roadblock for getting married. If a spouse comes to you who is competent, who has the piety, who is mature, and asks for your hand in marriage, get married. Do not delay it. But you can also add that stipulation that I want to continue my studies. I want to continue my studies and work it out. Inshallah, it will work out. Inshallah, it will work out. Sure, it's a little bit of extra work, maybe a lot of extra work, but that's better than continuing to postpone marriage until you reach an age where your options become less and less and less. The Prophet ﷺ is telling us, if you are capable of getting married, the right person comes, then get married. Now, I understand also that some people are try, and they try, but the right person doesn't come along. And by right person, I mean in accordance to Islamic understanding, not whoever kind of meets my feelings and my own personal criteria. I understand that happens sometimes, and perhaps that's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this person. But if a prospect comes to you, then don't reject it simply because you are pursuing certain worldly positions or worldly gains. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us in this crisis of marriage that we have here in America. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our options more, make them easier. Ya Rabbal Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.